here in the Netherlands, where basically you're like, why the fuck do I live here? And what I mean by that is
Okay.
it starts to become overcast. It becomes, you know, we don't have this state of weather in Texas that I would call damp. In Texas, it's either hot as fuck or wet. That's
Yeah.
about it,
All
right?
right.
Whereas here, it can be, well, in Austin, in Texas, there is another state, which is this liminal state between it used to be raining,
Mm-hmm.
now it is no longer raining, and now it's also hot as fuck.
Mm-hmm.
And I have this sort of like, let's imagine if you microwaved a gigantic goose feather carpet or a blanket that was wet, and you microwaved it and you
Mm-hmm.
wrapped it around you. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what it feels like after it rains and the sun's directly up.
Right. I think
Right?
you're describing humidity. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that
Humidity.
is that
Yes.
would that be what we're going at? Okay. Uh-huh.
Now we have humidity here in the Netherlands, but it's pleasant. It's not
Okay.
actually like hot. It's just sort of like, and that is kind of like the miasma, or is it miasma? Miasma, whatever it may be. That's the state that we're in now. And I would describe it as damp. Just like
Mm-hmm.
everything is wet and
Yeah.
it's not cold, but it's not nice
It's like
all the
it's like a
time.
brisk. It's like a brisk kind of like you go outside, you kind of feel it. No.
No, there's that. I know what you're saying. That is actually once you get to winter,
Mm-hmm.
that's a nice state to be in because it's just like cold, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cold and wet is better than this state, which is more like I don't even know how to describe it, but there's something unpleasant about it. And it's almost
So
like
is it warm and wet? Like what?
it's just like it's this indeterminate state between warm and cold, and you're just like, just make a fucking decision,
All right, so
right?
it's not
Like,
muggy. It's
don't
not
toy
cold.
with
It's
me.
not really, really warm, but it's still just kind of
Yeah,
just
it just kind of it just kind of sticks to you. Like maybe here's my last attempt to analogize it. Like you might go outside and you like, I don't know, you're gonna mow the lawn, maybe you're trying to like do some exercise, you get kind of sweaty, and you come back inside.
Mhm,
But if you were to sit in a room that had no air circulation
mhm.
and you kind of cool down and you feel kind of clammy, like just
Yeah, I
not a
get
good
it.
sense of
You
what's
kinda
going on.
sweat. I got you. So, I actually was lucky enough last week to spend a little time in Mexico, and that's one of these things I always notice. We're on the beach on the beach there, and it's like, yeah, like nothing really ever gets dry. Like, in Texas, like if you
Mm,
swim in Texas, right? You just sort of like can put your, swimsuit or whatever, just like put it outside for like 20 minutes and it just like, just
there you
dries
go.
up. Like in
Yeah.
Mexico, it's just like the humidity, just nothing ever gets like super dry. It's just always
Yeah,
kind of,
exactly.
which is
Now
nice.
now
Now, listen, I'm not complaining when you're by the ocean, by the pool, like, and it's
oh,
just,
of course,
yeah,
of
it's
course.
great. But like, you're like, oh yeah, I got to bring this stuff inside if I actually want it to get dry.
Now imagine that, except it's more cold than warm, right?
Hmm.
See, that's it's the other end of the spectrum. So that's all just a preface or a preface. I forget, like you've got a forward, which is spelled different than a forward in a book. Have you ever looked this up, Brandon? It's very
I'm
complicated.
aware of it, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to test it, get it all right. No,
I don't
I'll
know.
have
When
to
you
look
look
it up.
into the abyss, sometimes the abyss looks into you. But anyways, like my whole point of all this was it's also overcast and it starts to get gray. And I wanted to get some input, as I like to do at the beginning of these shows, because it's been about 6.5 years. I only vaguely remember. I know there is a time back in Texas in the winter where it's overcast and you kind of don't see the sun. And what are people doing nowadays to cope with that kind of thing? Because we're right on the precipice of that, where we're going to have to spend the next 3, 4, 5 months being like, I remember the sun. It made me happy.
Well, I think what you're describing though is largely like living in the Midwest of the United States, Chicago, Cleveland, that
Yes.
whole area. So what most of people in the US do is they move to like Texas, Florida, Georgia. Like that's what we do. It's like there isn't a
Mm,
long gray period here. It's like, even if it's a little bit cold, it's like the sun can be out, right? So as you know, Kate, you lived here for a long time. So I don't know. I feel like, a lot of times when you describe Amsterdam, I feel like it's like, I wonder if this is going to be offensive to Amsterdam, but like, it's kind of like the Chicago of Europe. You know what I mean? It's just like, because it's
mm.
like the windy city, Chicago's on the lakes and Amsterdam's right there
Wow,
on
that's pretty good.
you get a
Yeah.
lot of like, rain and the kind of like, what, and then the winters is where it really seems to be the same, right? Because it's like people in
Mm.
Chicago describe the same thing about October. The gray clouds in Ohio, all of Ohio says the gray clouds kind of just move in and then they stay until like March, right? And it's just kind of,
Mm.
and so that's why that's the advantage of living kind of in southwest. It's like, yeah, like it doesn't really get cold, and also it's even when it's cold, it can be sunny. So I don't
I
know. I
like
don't know
that.
if I have any help for you here, other than the, the most generic thing, like move or be one of those people that can like summer in one place and winter in another.
Uh-huh.
That
Yeah.
requires a lot of money. Um, Although I have heard about those lights, you can turn on like those like fancy
Oh
like
yeah, yeah. We
it's
have a giant IKEA panel light, which would be great for like podcast and influencer lighting.
right.
And we just got
Does it
to
give you like the
we got
right
to hook
amount
that
of
up.
vitamin D or something? Isn't there something like
Yeah.
it's
I think
yes,
people
you
here
need one of
actually
those.
take vitamin D like as part of life just because they need it. I like you were saying something I was thinking, which is I think you have identified a very American solution to problems, which I'm sure there's maybe Australia is like this. I can imagine like China, parts of Asia, but a lot of the times I'm going to estimate 30% of the time the solution for any American to a problem is just fucking move, which is just like that's not an option for most people,
Yeah,
especially here in the
it's true.
Netherlands.
You can move a long way in the United States. You can move between pretty distinct climates. That's for sure.
Yeah, they're
So
just like sick of this weather. Well, move,
yeah.
which is
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, that's actually, yeah, I've never really thought about that. I guess we do have a lot of you can kind of find what you like, and broadly speaking, United States, there's problems with each area, like climate wise. There's sort of like it's too cold, too hot, too humid. But like if you can kind of optimize on one, like living in Texas, like you're optimizing on it's extremely hot in the summer, almost unbearable. But then the rest of the year it's really great, right? And then
mm,
you can flip it around. If the heat's too much for you, right? Just head north, right? You find something that
mm,
Minnesota people like the summers in Minnesota are great, 10,000 lakes, they love it. And it's like, of course, the winter's pretty brutal. So you just gotta have to pick what you like. And then of course, where everyone wants to live, San Diego, right? That's like the perfect weather year round. But then you
sure,
got
sure.
your earthquakes and you got your landslides. So you just gotta pick what you want.
Huh, yeah. I like this theory of the American decision machine, which is other places you're forced to work with what you have, whereas here we can just get the fuck out of here and go somewhere else. So we're not necessarily incented to fix the situation we're in. Like there's this you've got like let's say 50 to 300 buckets that you can select that you want to be in. And so why fix the bucket you're in when you can just go to another bucket? And then over the centuries is a little too long. Over the decades, you get this kind of sorting into the buckets. You get the bucket that you wanted, basically.
Although you do have the flip side of that with the American, I guess maybe the Southwest or Southeast. It's like, well, sometimes people are like, well, if we just improve this a little bit, it'd be great, and then they ignore all the other
Mm.
problems. Like you could say, like broadly, the entire state of Florida, it's really a swamp that like some smart people figured out how to drain. But it's like, I don't know if that was smart. Like, there's a lot of weather issues. You know what I mean? It's like there's like maybe we shouldn't have so many people in Florida, but
Yeah,
it's
no,
like
that's true. Yeah,
what do you do? Like it's
Florida is kind of like the
yes.
Netherlands with hurricanes,
Yeah,
which
it's
which
like
I'm not sure that works.
yeah, there's a lot of reasons to be like, maybe we shouldn't have built so much in Florida. And then of course,
Mm.
if you've ever really, there's like two places everyone should go in the United States just to experience this. Like one, just drive in like the Western United States to be like, there is nothing here. It's like barren. You're like, there's nothing to see here. And then the equivalent is in South Florida. If you drive across like kind of the swamp, the Everglades area, and you're like, oh, I see. They said it was a swamp. And then you just see this vast swamp everywhere. And you're like, oh no, the whole state was like this. They just figured out how they drained parts of it. And you're like, oh, I can see why there's so much problems here. So
Yeah.
there you go. If you're ever here and if you're bored, those are two areas you can drive around and be like, this is kind of crazy, a crazy landscape. And if Matt were here, he'd probably just talk about Australia. Like, isn't like the entire middle of Australia just like desert?
Desert or
It's really
something.
just a Mad Max set. They're like, well, one day we want to make great movies, so we'll just have this big, vast desert. But other than making Mad Max movies, like there's nothing to do here.
Yeah, there's that big table of rock they have in the middle. I forget what they call it, but I should go there one day. Well, there's really no logical segue to it. But I was reading the news recently, which is to say earlier today. Anthropic had a big release of all their stuff. Sounds interesting. They've got the thing where I guess Microsoft maybe was trying to do this. What did they call the thing that would like take a screenshot of your desktop every 5 minutes?
Yeah, I know
So
what you're
you could
talking
like
about. I forgot
remember.
the name of a second, but yeah, it was like rewind or something. Yeah, I know what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah. And it's kind of on that path. And I don't know how it works. I don't understand generative AI and whatever, but it does sound pretty cool that Anthropic, you probably know what they call this. It has this thing where you can turn it on and it looks at your screen and then also controls the keyboard and the cursor and just will like take over for you and start doing stuff for you, which seems great. I think this is so close to what we need with AI, that maybe it can actually start simulating work for us. I think, the Elon Musk company had those robots which were remotely controlled, and I'm just now realizing. So if we combine together this Anthropic, this Claude, whatever it is, that's a side note we should talk about. Is why I have two different names, Anthropic and Claude. Seems like you would call them the same thing, but that's fine. So you could combine that together. It's basically like, putting a phone book on your mouse so that it clicks around and shows you up at work. But with all the return to office stuff, you could also get one of these Musk robots to like walk into work for you and badge in and sit at the desk and start doing work. And then
And
you could collaborate like those Edward Snowden bots that used to be at conferences that would like travel around with like the video. Like maybe this is a solution for our RTO stuff,
it's an
which
RTO agent, right?
which should be great because Anthropic is basically Amazon's AI company. So they've
Mhm.
kind of like created a problem and now they have a solution for the problem that
Right,
will
so we
drive
can go one
revenue.
step further. It's like what you do is you install Tailscale on your work computer, right?
Yes. Oh, I
Okay,
like
and
this.
then you use
Uh,
that as your exit node, right? And then you
uh-huh.
just have it do, you set up Claude to do all of your work for you, but all the traffic's coming through the exit node. So if anyone looks, it's like, yeah, I was there. I was working all day. Did you see? Look at the network traffic. I think that would be, this is it. This is finally an RTO agent. That's what we, that's ultimately what the people want. Now, I do think in all seriousness, though, I was looking at this because I know something you're talking a lot about, Cote, and I actually spent some time talking about is like, modernization and like, taking these legacy applications and figuring out what they're doing. And I don't know, robot process automation, RPA.
Mm,
That's like a category that's been around for a long time. Even
yep.
way back in the day, you and I sort of worked on some stuff where we would do like, testing websites to sort of record some transactions and replay them back. It was very like hard coded though. And I was like, is this really like, cause I kind of was thinking to myself, it's like, oh, well, this is the way to do modernization. Like forget about like rewriting the mainframe app. You know what I mean? It's just like,
Oh,
let's just, because if you got away from like all the fragile, if you will, like Windrunner, remember that? That was another one. Like you could like
yeah,
play
yeah.
back Windows events. It's like if you could just have something like interact with the application as it is, like does that kind of fundamentally change the way to
That's
look at
interesting.
modernization of applications? It's like because you don't really need to like if you don't have to touch it anymore, right? And if you just kind of tell it to do it, and people don't, it's like you don't need a good UI anymore. You know what I mean? It's just sort of like let this computer just figure out how to use the old 3270 emulator and
Uh-huh,
and all the
exactly.
things that human beings like are really frustrated at, like, because the example they showed was like take information from a spreadsheet and enter it into like I think a CRM system. I think that's the one I watched or
Yeah,
something
yeah.
like that. And I was like, exactly. It's like we've all done this kind of work. It's very painful. And it's like, well, instead, and then of course there would be like, maybe you could upload. Think about how we would solve this today. It's like, could you upload the spreadsheet or could you make the UI better? Or could you do autocomplete or like, all the like human ways to make that better. But it's like, oh, even better would just be like, I don't know. Here's the information. Here's the application. Just do all of this and maybe just throw up a screen for me to be just like validate it. Like, here's everything I found. And I was like, maybe this like really maybe we rethink how we modernize apps then.
I think you're onto something. I mean, the canonical case that everyone's familiar with is hospitality. Whatever they're doing at the hotel check-in or the gate agent when they're
Yes.
using the airline desk, right? It's always some whacked out green screen application. I mean, not a lot of those have been modernized, but you can tell just by the amount of time it takes them to type to check you into a room that there is something batshit crazy going on, right? Like it really should just be like when you check into a room, they should see your ID and maybe even scan your ID and it brings up a thing and it should basically be like, yes, that should be the totality of it, right? Maybe if you have like, your titanium elite 1K platinum, like there'll be another button that says upgrade and you can click
Mhm.
on that and it will say yes. But obviously there's a lot more going on than that because they're always type and doing things, right? But I have not thought of that, but that is a good point that maybe you won't ever need to modernize software if you have these agents that just put up with the old bullshit and like really just bridge you from it, right? And you could even layer on top, if you still wanted a UI, you could still have a UI on top that just has the big yes button, which is a fascinating idea that you could do that. I think maybe a test case. I haven't done this in a while, but they have they still have over here, going back to the Netherlands, they still have like locksmiths that also will fix your shoes for you, like stores, very quaint that you can go to. So they don't have those machines. I think they have this back in the States where you just put a key in and it, duplicates the key for you or makes a
Right.
new key. And I
Mhm.
imagine, tell me if I'm wrong, Brandon, but I bet there's some software that you have to interface with to make your
Yes, there's a
key.
little kiosk, right? We have to like
And
punch in
I'm
some numbers.
guessing
Mhm.
on average that software is horrible, right? Like it may not be really what you want. So that might be a good consumer use case is if I were to hold up my phone and get Claude on here and say like, "Hey, just tell me what to do," right? Like hold it up to the software and have it emulate what it thinks a better UI would be. That would be a fun use case. And then maybe they could just, instead of having to upgrade all that key making software, they can have Claude do it for them.
Right, or just
They
yeah,
can
just start it
modernize
and
it.
you just talk to it. Like, you don't even have to hold anything up, just like, "Hey, I'm here to make a cake." Do it, right? And I
Right.
do think the one place, the thing I'm really interested in is, like, the natural integration, of course, would be, at the operating system level, and you mentioned it before, I did look it up, that it was called Microsoft Recall, and they were doing, that was the
Yes.
name of the feature, but they sort of were, pitching it more as, like if you forgot, like, like it sort of records everything, but you're like,
It
what
was your
website
memory.
was I at like at yesterday? Which is, I mean, which is a fine use case. But what's much more interesting is the integration, and I guess we kind of see it a little bit, but like if it was just sort of like both the Mac and Windows, right? It's sort of like you just sort of like everything by default, everything has an AI interface. It's like, yeah, like, and you just kind of tell it what you want it to do, right? And it just sort of like, it's sort of like, yeah, set up my desktop for a Zoom meeting, a web meeting, like share screen, like
Uh-huh.
make
Yeah.
the sound, put the sound on my earphones, make sure test my mic, all the, and it's just like it figures out how to do all of that stuff. And I think to me that would be like the next level of like, could you actually integrate this layer like right into the operating system? So you're just like, it's almost like, only in it's kind of like self-driving or something. It's like only in emergencies do you like actually touch the keyboard, right? Otherwise, you're just like the thing we always kind of joke about here is like CSV. It's like, yeah, parse all this data. You can just kind of tell it, like, yeah, parse all the names and addresses out of this and put it in a comma delimited format. Just kind of figured it out for you, right? Or even go further, be like,
Uh-huh.
take all these names and addresses and put them in my contacts, right? And just do, and then and maybe it just pops up. Maybe it's too much to ask that it would figure out, but it would sort of like, it would say like, show you a list. Like, here's everything I found. Do you want to improve or, disapprove? And then of course, our favorite people, the investment bankers, like imagine, yeah, like format all of the slides correctly. And they go through and they do all that, crazy formatting. And that would be good for all of us. And it's like, I do like that. I mean, I guess it's sort of, it isn't like the most, if you will, sexiest view of AI. It's not like, oh, we're all just doing stuff, but it's just sort of like the rudimentary, boring kind of like cut and paste. It's almost like that. I never want to cut and paste again. I want the AI to just do all of that for me and just kind of be showing, because like think about how many times you cut and paste in a given day, right?
Oh,
It's
all
gotta
the
be
time.
hundreds, right? Like you almost feel like that's what we're doing half the time is cutting, pasting, maybe reformatting. And it's just like all of that work should just be left to the computer. and then it's just asking you for approvals, right? And that's all you need. I think that would be, I mean, because it's probably closest to coding now. Like when you're coding, you can pretty much do that where it's like it's sort of like spitting out lines of code. You're kind of looking at it. You're running the test cases. If it's all working, you kind of accept it. You can check it into GitHub. Oh, even better, I would never even have to pretend that I learned GitHub, right? Like, I wouldn't have to watch the video over and over. It's like, I don't know, commit this, right? I don't know. Give me like, I don't know if I want to branch it. Like, take my work, put it on my desktop. I'm done with it now. Like, put it away. You don't even have to use the old all the GitHub language. Just like figure it out, GitHub. I don't know if I branched or what. I don't know what I need to do. Just my work is done. Patch it in. So I like it. I like all of these ideas. Now, of course, when I watched the demo, I'm like, man, we've seen a lot of attempts at this before, right? We've seen a lot of never kind of AI, but we've seen a lot of attempts at like RPA today is very fragile, right? Like change one thing about the application, you break all of your automation. So a part of me is like, I don't know if that's a burden, like I just lived through that, so therefore I'm skeptical, or if that's like a, if you will, hard-earned experience to be very skeptical of these things. Like maybe I can't have the AI constantly doing it wrong, or every third thing can't be wrong and I have to go back and fix it. Then you wasted my time. So I don't know. Like, are you optimistic here, Cote? Or are you sort of
Well,
pessimistic? Yeah.
it's only just now I'm thinking through all the implications of this, and I like it as I like it in the version where it works most of the time. That's great, right? But
Yeah.
it could be very frustrating. It's almost like, have you ever, like, on your iPhone, you're in some app with text and you want to paste some text at the end of a sentence that is on the edge of the screen, and you're just like, I know I got to like hold down my finger so it pops up that little thing that says paste.
Mm-hmm.
And in that situation, it's always difficult. You really want to like hold down your finger to paste in the middle of the screen. But if you're on the edge at an end of a sentence, it's
Mm-hmm.
always going to be a little wacky, right? And so it's that kind of like, I guess it's not an uncanny valley, but it's like this uncanny valley of like user experience, like UX stuff where like, ooh, it just always just barely doesn't work, right? There's something just not quite right about it. And so I could see that if you were just speaking like, to like do something in an existing application, especially adding a calendar, I bet once again, that's going to be the ultimate use case where you're going to want to say, hey, open up the calendar app, or in my case, BusyCal, and add a reoccurring event on Saturday for 11:30 a.m. to take the kids to tutoring. Oh, but I want to include the drive time, which is like 25 to 25 minutes. So add the address for the tutoring, which is in my contacts book. I got to go make a sandwich, right? And you come back and you're like, why is this on Tuesday every fifth day, right? Like, and so like, kind of interpreting that stream of weirdness, right? I think you'll probably, for a couple of years, find yourself in the situation where you want to be like, go 10 pixels to the northeast, click,
Click.
right? And you really just want to be like, okay, now put this text in, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it actually does make sense. Your notion that maybe we never have to update software again from a UI perspective, because we'll just have AIs figuring out the AI UI, which would be refreshing. That would be a nice use. It kind of like breaks it out of the text area, like the text box. I think that's how most people think about text AIs now, and images, but not as far as like, as you're saying, RPA stuff. Like
Well, I just think
moving
it like
things
comes back.
around.
I don't know. I mean, a very boring term for this to be like, forms based AI. It's like, or
Yes.
PDFs. It's sort of like, get the AI good enough that it can, if you will, populate every form that you see during the day. When you get a PDF for like a medical request or records, or you got to like sign
Right. Right. Right.
a PDF that you got to fill out for like a school event, or there's just so much of this stuff. And same thing, every SaaS-based application is like, kind of like 1Password will sort of do this, and like the Apple will pretty much do this, like fill in my, contact information and registration. Is like, I should never have to do that again. It should just be like, it should see the screen, it should do all the registration, make a password, put it in 1Password for me, do a passkey, whatever. And it's just like, but if we ever got to that level of just sort of like all the forms, all the PDFs were taken care of, I mean, I don't know. I feel like we're like at
Right.
10 or
And
20%
then
of like white collar work is like that.
I think for you personally, from what I've heard over the years, the next level that would be valuable is that every time there's a new senior executive at a company that you partner with, they could just re-explain the value of partnering with your company. Just kind of load that up into the corpus,
Well,
and they
that's
could
all
just
that's I
interact with
mean,
it.
that's like getting to like the second level of work. But I do think it's what you were saying there. I thought you were going to go with like to me. I mean, the best case example is like the brand team has released a new set of templates. It's
Oh,
great. The rebrand. It's like I'm fine with it, but it's just like yeah, like take my current presentation and like convert it all to like the new brand and do it in a way that it's
that's
correct.
a
It's
good
like
idea.
eliminate
Yeah.
all the cutting and pasting or like when you import something into the new template, but it drags along its previous styles. It's like, no, like take all this text, now put it in the new template and make sure everything is aligned, right? Like that kind of work, fantastic, because like who isn't doing that? Who isn't like constantly,
Oh, the
reformatting
worst.
stuff in the same stuff? And it's like, oh, that would be great. So like all of that, like it's almost like you like to talk a lot about like developer toil, right? And it's sort of like, I guess we're just kind of here, like we're just brainstorming. We probably go 3 hours on this. So it's like, here's just white collar productivity toil. It's just cutting, pasting, and they can even start with, I just think literally, paste, just the paste AI. It's like, look at the application where I'm pasting it and figure out, do I want to paste with formatting or without formatting? Don't make me do it. Like you
Mm.
figure out, you see where it came from, you see where it's going. You can even see in the clipboard, like what's there. Does it bring in just the text or is it bring in all the formatting with it? Like you AI figure that out for me so that I'm like, oh, it's like, oh, I wanted the formatting. I didn't want the formatting. Or like, oh, now I got to do, I bet you everyone does this. I got to paste in plain text, but then I'm going to go, if you will, grab the little formatter, if you will, like copy button, and then I'm going to paste that format on the new text. You know what I mean? And figure it's like
Oh,
do all that stuff for me. Like figure all that out for me. I love because there's no value as a human being. I'm adding no value there other than just sort of like just sort of like code monkey, right? Or just format monkey. That's all I'm doing.
yeah. I mean, you're always like, why did I get the fucked up bullet points when I pasted this? Why don't I get the real? And I think another use for some of these AIs would be like, let's say you've got a lot to say about this community you've built over the years. And for some reason, your comms or your PR people, they're not really filtering what you're doing very well. I think maybe off there in WordPress land, someone should make like an AI that's just like, hey, when to not go crazy, right? Like, just
Yeah.
like everything's fine. Let's filter all of our messaging through the PR bot and the comms bot and see what they had to say about it.
Well, that's
And
almost like the AI therapy bot, right? It's like, whoa, Mr. Executive, you've gone a little too far. So I like that.
yeah.
That's like third level. I like it though. I like that idea.
I think maybe we could call that agent like the little people's opinion, right? Like what are the little people going to say about this? And yeah, and I bring that up. It's been I think it's been a while. Several weeks have been going on in the WordPress drama. We skipped a week last week to have an episode of the software defined interviews stuff, which I hope everyone enjoyed. And it seems like I don't know, like we got the WordPress drama with Photomat there, just kind of going off the rails about things. Maybe, I can see the perspective that like we talk a lot about open source stuff, and there is sort of the what if you were to just like go super hard on the freeloaders, basically.
Mhm.
Anyways, not really worth it to delve into there because I think was it Adam Jacob, as always, is just sort of like, yeah, that's how open source works. I think that's the conclusion to all of this. But I think here's what I want to get from you, Brandon, is do you have a sense that have we reached the apex of it and it's just going to kind of go away, or is there going to be more drama in WordPress land? Like, does the story go on?
Well, the potential apex of this entire story was, when DHH is like the sound calm person chiming in, you're like, you've
Mm.
reached like a new level. Like, because I was like, maybe this is the actual apex. Because DHH, if I could say that, wrote a post called "Open Source Royalty and Mad Kings," And like he just kind of laid out like to make a long story short, laid out like, hey, you've kind of gone too far here, right, Matt? This is, I guess, referring to Matt Mullenweg, and like, you need to kind of rein it in. You just sort of, the idea, and the Mad King thing, I thought was like kind of a good analogy. I was like, yeah, I think this is kind of gone crazy. And so, and you're like, okay, well, maybe that'll just kind of end. And then Matt Mullenweg comes back and he started out something like, well, we want to keep this conversation cordial. And I attempted to get on the phone with DHH, but we couldn't do it. But so in lieu of that, let me
Get out
put
the
out my thoughts.
flamethrower.
And it's just, I mean, it is just a litany of personal attacks against DHH,
Yeah.
right? It's like this is like, I mean, you're the world of philosophy and like debate. I was like, this is the classic, ad hominem attack, right? We're no longer even talking about the issues. I'm just going to attack everything you've done in your career, which, I mean, maybe like you can have some critiques of DHH's career. I mean, no problem with that. But I'm like, this is not the issue today, right? This is not where we are. And so I was just like, wow, it's really, I thought, so I really was like, this has finally gone to the point of where it's like,
Yeah. It
just
is
completely out of
it
control.
is
So,
weird.
um, so there was that, and then I guess the other kind of news out of it was that if you hadn't been following it, that originally buyouts were offered. I think we covered that last show or a few shows ago. And I think like 100+ people took it, and then I guess there was even more drama, so more buyouts were offered, and so I guess at the end, I think we're just like what we're back to is kind of where we left it before. It's like this will just going to sit with trademark lawyers, and ultimately a judge will have to like decide what trademark is actually owned by whom and what is allowed to be used publicly. But I just think like this is one of these things where it's like, man, traditional software licensing has never looked better after watching this. You're like, what would have been good if everyone just like we just paid someone to do this? Because I was like, the way that they've kind of hurt the user base and like all this like weird kind of playing with the plugins and denying it. I'm like, this is just awful behavior. So I haven't seen anything new. So maybe someone got a hold of Matt and was just like, okay, we've got the lawyers involved. You'll have your day in court, but maybe just tone it. Like, I wouldn't say tone it down. I'd be like, just don't hurt any more of the actual users using WordPress. Like you can sue WP Engine and they can counter sue you. And this can go on for years. And if that's winning, then you can do that. But like in the interim, can we just let people write their blogs? I mean, it seems as simple as that.
Yeah, yeah. It is odd. You don't want I don't know. Hopefully it'll be like most open source drama we've covered on this esteemed series here, where there's a lot of discussion for about 30, 90 days, and then everyone forgets about it. They it's not really a big deal after a while, because it does seem like it's I don't know. It's
Well,
a
it's kind of back to
weird
our
situation.
AI discussion. Is like I think at the end of the day, it's like no one really wants to manage a content management system. That's another task that is just nothing but pain. So it would be great if there was ultimately an AI thing where it's just like, yeah, like I wrote, here I wrote this great article. It's all done. Even had AI help me, and I want you to post it to my site. Here's my site. Just do it. And like I don't want to mess with WordPress or any of this. So hopefully AI can maybe it can save us from all of this, which would be even better.
Once again, AI saves us. Well, I think this is also a good opportunity to check in on the whole private cloud repatriation thing.
Yeah,
There's been a series, which is to say two. I think several months ago, we covered that Geico was saying they're going to move to OpenStack from VMware,
we did. Yep.
which great for OpenStack. And I think also recently there was a write up that the Geico people. They have a new CIO. Looks like she's got a lot of great ideas executing on stuff. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Bold plans. Gonna repatriate stuff from cloud. And I think the quote was that when they moved to public cloud, their bills went up by 2.5x. I guess that's 250%. So we'll have to see. It's probably a couple of years to like bring stuff back there. And I think some of our listeners in the Software Defined Talk Slack, which you can join if you go to softwaredefinedtalk.com/Slack, they noted that there were a lot of job ads for Geico for like on-premises IT stuff. And then of course you already brought up the Danish guy, DHH. They also said they're going to save 10 million over 5 years, which sounds great. I'd like to save 10 million over 5 years. I could do with that. by we covered this a while ago by bringing they bought a bunch of Dell servers. They're going to run all their stuff on Dell servers. Now, you talk with a lot of people, Brandon, who are in this area. What is the deal with this private cloud and repatriation? Is this a thing, or is it just like a few little things here and there that people are mentioning?
Well, I think the 37 signals one, I just kind of throw that out. I think that's sort of mostly nonsense. It's also a very specialized small company. So I just think it's like for large enterprises, I don't know, that doesn't apply. So I just think there's a lot of smoke there, but there's no real fire. Now, the Geico one, because I think you're the one who actually posted this in the Slack this week, I went through and I was like, this one I think is kind of interesting because I don't think there's anybody has like an axe to grind. I think the Geico, person is just sort of like, here's what we've been doing. Here's what I mean, it's just very measured, right? It's a very kind of
Mm,
like slow take analysis, which I like, right? And they just, because they said something along the lines of like they were 10 years into their cloud journey and they still haven't migrated everything to the cloud and their bills went up. And like that is very relatable to like the people I talk to, right? It's like because they have a large portfolio of IT applications, they have a large customer base. Insurance is, inherently complicated. And, they've been at it for a while. So this isn't some reactionary kind of like, we moved one application, it didn't work, we're all coming back. It's like they've been doing that for 10 years. And I would say it's like, while it's very relatable, I guess the question is almost like the will to like reduce costs and make it work. It's like probably if we dove into the Geico thing, this is probably, where you spend a lot of time for speaking, Cote. It's like there probably is some internal inertia that really has made it hard for them to like really
mm.
embrace all of the benefits of the cloud, right? This is what I think the hyperscaler would say to them. It's like, well, you're just kind of moving things over. You're not rethinking how to do it. And that's why your bills are going up. It's like you're just kind of doing what you did before.
You
And
haven't
also,
fully transformed.
right. And they would also say it's like probably, and again, I don't think the Geico people are even being disingenuous. It's like, but I think it's just hard. They would probably say something like, you probably don't really realize how much you're actually spending because a lot of these costs are hidden costs, like running your own
Mm.
data center and kind of all the things that go into it, versus like you actually see a bill and it's like, whoa, this is a lot more expensive, but you don't think about all the hidden costs inside of that. Now, having said all that, still, I mean, I still think it's interesting that like they've given it a good shot. They still haven't gotten there. And so maybe there's just a realization of like, hey, we just like it's too much work to move everything and migrate everything. And we're not going to get there. So let's just commit to keeping it on premise, which I mean, it's more like I would say to kind of your original question, it's less about repatriation at this point. It's just people not moving, right? They're sort of like looking at it and be like, that's a big migration cost. I think I'll stay where I'm at. And I think that's more common than this repatriation is not making the initial move. What are your thoughts?
Well, so I got a couple of things there. One is I wonder. So again, drawing from the people we both talked to, what do you think of the theory that like moving from one, we'll just say cloud, but changing your IT, whatever that may be, is let's say 90% of the time driven by valid or invalid wanting to lower your cost versus like wanting to have new capabilities. Like we'll throw out security here because security is always like comes in and gets its own agenda because security like is driven by fear and not necessarily by like cost, but by the rest for the rest of IT. A lot of it's maybe a lot of the like big decisions are just sort of like, well, is this going to be cheaper? Then let's not do it. Right. Like now, of course, there's sort of like customer experience. We could have like the US passport apps that we're always going on and on about that seem to be improving, like things like that. But you still probably have to make the case that cost is a driver, right? Like if it's to put it another way, if it's more expensive to have better customer experience, you're probably going to stay with the shit customer experience, right? And so in most cases of transformation and transitions, the cost has to at least promise to be lower. Otherwise, why would you do it?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. I think for like kind of like the lines of business employees, I think cost is the number one thing they're sort of obsessed with, right? But I think a couple things that you talked about there. One, I think we talked a lot about, the global entry, and I just did it again. Every time I do it, it's like magic. You just literally look at a screen and then you just walk to the passport person. They see all your information and they mostly just wave you by. And it's like nothing about that directly reduces the cost of running those systems. Like I'm sure to get all that technology to work, it was very expensive, but the user experience is so much better. And obviously there's a case to be made that like you can process, if you will, people coming into the country a lot faster. So there's some kind of productivity increases, but that, it'll be hard to figure out like exactly how much
The
you're saving.
causation there.
But you needed somebody at the top to be like, no, this is like we wanted to do it. The other one on travel I was thinking of that's sort of related to this is like, you know, every time you fly and you kind of encounter airline Wi-Fi, right? It's usually a sign of frustration. But like here
Mm.
in at least in the US, when you fly Delta, it's like, oh my God, like we have the actual internet. We don't have the fake internet. We don't have just texting. We don't have like I can't stream anything. I have the actual internet in this flying plane and I can do anything I want, right? And it's like it's almost like magical, right? So I'm sure that was incredibly expensive, right? And it's free. Also, Delta, at least the times I've used
Mm.
it, has been free. And it's like somebody at Delta ultimately, had to figure out like it was worth it, right? And I just think like these big decisions are really, really difficult, right? To make. And it takes somebody at the very top to like actually push it through and say, like, I'm gonna do it. And I don't know. And I just think it comes down to it's like there's at any company, there's only a few people that can actually, push that through. And otherwise, everybody else is sort of subjected to like building a spreadsheet and, if you will, proving that there's some cost benefit analysis, like you were saying, and that limits what I think people are even willing to think about and even trying, if you will.
Huh. Your Delta example, that's brewing a new idea in my head. So one, I think we can all agree that if your customer experience, if some software IT thing you're doing has better customer experience and the customer experience is cheap enough, which is to say it has good ROI, you would do it, more or less, right? Like we're going to get a return on having a better user experience, on changing the way that we're doing things. And it's not overly expensive, then you would do that. Now, there's other cases, and maybe this is why it takes the government sometimes, depending on the government, so long to catch up to like what seems like a simple software thing. Is it just like there's no ROI on it? Like you don't have enough money to pay for what would obviously be good, so you just kind of use what you have. Government's a weird place for ROI, but whatever. Or my beloved, my infamous example is my life insurance policy. For many years, I would have to print out a PDF and like mail it
Yep.
with a check. And just like I'm sure it was principle. And I'm sure they were just like, or we could make money. Like that's
Yep.
probably what the product managers were thinking each year when they kind of considered what to do. Finally, for several years now, they have had like it's sane. It all works out great. Good job, principal. Love what they're doing over there in Iowa. Uh, but maybe there's also this type of better software that I'm going to call like loss leading customer experience. Where like in the same idea of like a grocery store, like there's not really like you're selling something below cost. You're not necessarily making money on it, but like with the Delta example, like you're not really like making money on free real internet, but your hope is that this loss leader thing is causing people to have more long-term loyalty for Delta or just wanting, it's tough to think like would the infrequent traveler choose to fly in Delta because of better internet? So you're probably going after your sort of like long-term loyal people. Maybe you also like, well, if we have the real internet, it's cheaper for like our in-flight stuff to use. Although you have to imagine that they have their own crazy ass enterprise grade internet that they use to run their actual like employee facing
Right.
systems on a plane than Starlink or whatever. But like it seems like you can't really, to your point, ever make the case that like good like real internet on Delta is a moneymaker. So you just have to, like at a grocery store, you've got to be like, yeah, you know, if we do a combo loco and we lose money on the tortillas, people are going to buy the beef and then they're going to buy the milk and they're
Right.
probably going to buy a 12 pack of beer. Boom, we've made tons of money, right? And they're going to know that you come to HEB for the combo locos and you're going to be fine, right? And so it's like this ongoing thing that there's no ROI for the IT itself, but it like makes you money in the other part of the business just by being sane.
I think you're right. I mean, but I just, at the begin, I guess, it's sort of like where AI can't help, right? And I think like
Mm,
so many companies, large companies specifically, like they have a very strong gating system of being like, what do you want to do? How many resources do you want? Show me the business case. If I give you this money, how much of this money is going to turn into revenue and like how much increased revenue, right?
exactly.
And on the face of it, like, of course, makes total sense, right? That like who wouldn't run a business like that? But there's always this other side. And I think, especially when you're dealing with software or dealing with customers, there's just sort of like, no, we know ultimately delivering a great customer experience will make us more money. And like, we shouldn't have to debate that, right? The more that we debate that, the more that we're not spending time making that great customer experience, right? I
Exactly.
think that's the biggest thing. So it's like somebody at Delta is like, no, we're doing this because it's going to be great. And you know what it's going to do? It's going to help the overall brand of Delta. Like, look how many times we've talked about on this show. It's a great experience. We can do it just like maybe Delta wants to have like clean planes, right? No one's like, what is the ROI of cleaning the plane? It's like we believe we
Oh,
want
that's a
our
good one.
passengers to come on
Yeah.
and they want to have a nice clean plane. They want to have seats that are relatively new, right? That and all of this together is like the brand promise we're trying to deliver on. And it's like you can either empower people to like go do that, right? And like find ways to do that and be hunting for better things to do that. Or you can hold people hostage to be like, no, no, everything that you do, you have to justify. Like, you want to clean the plane in extra time? Why? Why do you want to, like, how much more money is that going to make you? And it's like, well, in the end, like, probably not. Like, and a very small thing, like, we've joked a lot about this on this podcast, but like, every piece of software probably since other than like since I've gotten into product management, right? Almost it was a long time ago. Like every piece of software that I'm sort of involved in, like I will just like ram through export to CSV. Like people will like come at me and be like, I'm not sure we can do it. We have this other thing, and I'll just be like, no, we're doing it. No, we're doing it. No, we're doing it. Like I just like will not allow anyone to not because I'm just like, I just know, like I intrinsically know this is what people expect. They want it there. It's not a line item that's going to make us money. But damn it, like when they get to a table and they need to put that in Excel, at least for the stuff I'm touching, I'm going to make it happen. And it's just like, and there is, and I think like the Delta Wi-Fi, whoever did it, the CEO or the IT person there was like, you need some of that. And kind of back to this modernizing kind of applications, like you really got to have some of that. And if you want an organization thinking like that, right, you got to really empower the people to be like, no, no, think about the experience, obsess over the
Mm,
experience, and know that like in the end, it will come back to you in a better brand perception, better word of mouth, right? All these things that are very hard to track, right? And I think we're just like we just get too fixated on ROI models, at least in software. And of course, there's a limit, right? Like if someone walked in and is like, I've decided we're going to build a nuclear power plant because I want to have clean energy and it's going to give us a brand promise. I'm like, okay, we can't do that. That's like billions of dollars. It's going to take a decade. We don't have any money for that. But, on a much smaller scale, there's lots of stuff that you can do it. So it's back to like creating a culture where that happens all the time.
mm. Yeah, yeah. I like where you're going. Like you're going there. I think you have an intuition that exporting to CSV is just always going to be needed. You don't need to make a case for it. That's why they hire Brandon, because he knows you need to export to CSV. And the analogy is, and then you're cleaning the airplanes. That also makes sense. Like there's an interesting sort of side thought to have there that you can tell when you add something like cleaning the airplanes to your business processes. It also gives you an option when you need to not clean the airplanes. Like you can tell when they need a fast turnaround time, like, oh, look, here's an empty pretzel bag in the backseat pocket, right?
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
they're just like, we can play with this lever. Like we want clean airplanes, but like it's not about the ROI. It's like, what do we need to do to get this plane in the air? So like there's some interesting squishiness there. But I think the analogy is that like export to CSV is like cleaning the airplanes. It's like this thing. There's no proof for it. You always just want to like have that in there, and I don't know. Like I'm gonna have to consider that for the ROI things. Now, other ROI stuff. Our old friends over there at BMC looks like they're going through another cycle in late term software living. They're going to split between. I've lost track of BMC since they renamed whatever they do Helix. I think Helix is their ServiceNow division. Like
Okay.
it's all if I remember, it's all the Remedy. That's what they called it, right? Like we were there even before Remedy,
Well,
but
that
it
was
sounds
long. I
like
mean, now we're into like prehistoric days, but yes.
they're dividing the distributed part of the company from the mainframe part of the company,
Mhm.
right? And they're going to split those two up. And I think I don't really, there's always the stuff. It's going to be easier to focus on the product stuff and blah blah blah. Which now that I've worked in several large companies, I do sort of give some credence to like we just got to separate these people because they keep sabotaging each other, basically, which is pretty sad that you have to have like a big structure for it. But like, I don't quite understand why you would separate these two businesses unless there's just some sort of like financial stuff going on. Because they've been together for a while. It's probably fine. So, like, what is the product management perspective on why you would completely separate a mainframe business from a distributed business? Like, can't they just get along?
Well, I think this is sort of like one of the rare cases for the software defined talk, M&A consulting firm. Normally, people want to buy stuff, and the answer is like after the big presentations and everyone's done it, we say no, it's probably not a good idea. So this is the opposite. It's like we want to break stuff up, and it's like
Mm,
I think the answer here is like, well, if you have a buyer for the thing, like, oh, the only reason I would say this would be like, okay, is there somebody that wants to buy one of the things you're about to break up? And
right, right,
have
right.
they told you it's almost like I'll buy your house only it passes after it passes inspection. You know what I mean? It's like I need you to do all of this work for me. And if you do, I can then buy it. Right. But as it is right now, I cannot buy it. So the only logical explanation to me is like they need to break this up. They need to maybe get a couple quarters of like financials that can be audited so the market can see it. The investment bankers can go out and build a pitch deck and kind of get the valuations that they want. And they can say that they've done all the work. They've done all the, if you will, um, you know, disentanglement and covenant
Sure.
separation work, right? They've got the right employees are now in the right place, and all the, they're obviously going to be some kind of cost cutting and potential like duplications of efforts, but they figured all of that out. So they just have a nice asset that they can sell. To me, that's the only reason you do this. Otherwise, it's fine. Cote, you and I have worked at like numerous big companies. They can have just one division called Helix and one division called Mainframe or Control M or whatever they want to call it, and just be like, they never really have to talk, because like this, I mean, I don't know. I've worked at so many companies where it's like Sun Microsystems, the one that just jumped into mind. Like I worked in like the software identity management group. I had no idea what was going on with Spark. I'd be at a trade show.
Mm,
Somebody asked me,
yeah.
it's like I have no idea, and it's like I didn't bother them. They didn't bother me. There was no there was no confusion. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, the Spark people are putting in a new chip. That means I can't work on my identity management software. It's like, no, had nothing to do with it. So to me, that's the only rationale is that like spinning this off creates a new asset that they can sell. Or they just believe it's going to be valued at some high multiple. And I'm like, that last example, though, I'm like, I don't think so. I'm like, listen, everybody knows
Yeah.
what you have. Like, you're not going to spin this out. You're going to get some new multiple. You can spin this out to sell it, but that's the only reason to do it.
I get, yeah. There's probably, again, it's not like 100% of the time, but there probably is a universal rule of like, maybe all companies, but definitely tech company corporate strategy where if you do create a starkly separate unit, spin it out, it's really just to sell it. Like there's really, or sell it or like have it be its own entity. Like somehow you're making money off of it. There's really no like product rationale behind it. Like it's almost like whatever you may, and I don't know if this is the case with BMC. I'm generalizing now to be polite, but it's the equivalent of like I resigned to spend time with family. It's just like no. That's not the reason. It's not because of product stuff. It's because something else is going on
Right.
that you
Well,
don't
but I
want to
do
talk
think,
about.
there was a great diagram. We didn't really talk about it. I think it was in last a couple weeks ago, and it showed the history of like kind of all the merger of like media companies. So like media companies being spun out and bought back, and like DirecTV spinning out and being bought. Like DirecTV was like bought and sold like a bunch of times, and like it kind of shows the entire history of all this stuff. And it just kind of shows like these overlapping companies. Like one moment it would be spin out, and then somebody would
Mm,
buy it, and then somebody would buy that, and then they would, kind of Verizon and Yahoo, and like just like all these companies things. And at the end it was like, after 20 years of doing this, you kind of look at it and like really nothing had changed. You're just like, what was the purpose of all of
yeah.
this? Why did all this stuff get bought and sold like a million different ways? And I kind of feel like when I see something like this, it's kind of how I feel. It's like, I don't think the customer is going to benefit in any new way. I don't think suddenly either one of these companies is going to financially outperform and do like a million times better. It's like, I guess if like Helix and the BMC control mainframe stuff can like live somewhere else, it's great. But like, it won't shock me in 5 years if we're talking about like, oh, well, the BMC control M mainframe stuff, it was kind of bought by CA, right? Which was already been bought by, I guess, Broadcom, right? Or it's all spun back out, right? And they're like, it's just like, at the end of the day, it's just like, this is just, Wall Street kind of just, it's probably the bad side of Wall Street. It's just like buying and selling companies that really has no value to the end users or to the actual owners of the company. So that's why I'm just like, yeah, it just seems kind of a big mess.
Well, we'll have to check back in 5 years for our. What would that be, a bi-decadal, a single, whatever, or checking on BMC to see how things are going there. Well, speaking of check-ins, we should check in on any sort of software-defined talk bureaucracy that we have. Anything going on over there on Bureaucracy Street?
A couple things here. So for you, Cote, Craig Box, he says that he believes the generic term for fried chicken seller in the UK is kebab shop. So I don't know if that's true or not. You were
Hmm.
talking about
I
chicken
can't
shops a while back,
I
so I don't know
I
if
can't
that's true or
verify
not.
that, but I could believe that. I think
Believe that.
in Europe, kebab is sort of like a generic term for like shitty hole in the wall to get food that probably will kill you if you eat too much of it.
Nice, nice. And also, Matt and I, we had a long tangent on talking about large monuments, I guess, in Australia. So I invited people to send me some other examples, and there actually are. The listeners delivered. So Brian sent in all the links will be in the show notes here. The world's largest buffalo monument, that's over in Jamestown, and then Porco. I'm not never sure if I'm saying that right. I guess Canada's in on the acts of the 20 plus. Let's see, I guess what it's called here. It's the Canada's largest roadside attraction. So there's over 20 of those as well. And then, of course, Craig Box again, he emailed. So, of course, if Australia has it, it means New Zealand has it. So he sent in a whole list of New Zealand's large things as well. So I don't know. I guess it's just universal. Like every country, every part of the world has its own large
Has big things.
roadside attractions. So I don't know what it says about humanity. You always wonder if like aliens showed up, they'll be like, why are all these large monuments like scattered around the world? Can't really explain it, but it's pretty cool. So if you like to see any of them, there's plenty to go through. Check the show notes and have some fun. You can see the large things around the world.
That sounds like a great philosophical treatise for that crazy communist Eastern European guy whose name starts with S. I should look him up. He's delightful to listen to because he makes no sense. Now, I have one follow up there. You said you never know if you're pronouncing Borko correctly, which implies you encounter this word often, Brandon.
Well,
Or
no, I just
like,
see him
has
in the
Borko
Slack.
come up?
And in the Slack, he's one of our Slack
Oh, okay.
people, and like I see his username or our Slack
Oh, it's
name.
the username. I
And
thought
so
this was a
I see it
location
all
in
the time, and I
Canada.
was like, and then I'm like, there's a lot, there's people from around the world. And I'm like, the names I'm always worried that I'm saying the names wrong.
Sure, sure.
And then of
Okay,
course
okay.
sometimes it's not a name. It's just like like you've got many usernames. I just kind of throw that in the Slack, but that's all I got. That's all I have to go by. So I don't know.
Well,
I don't know
good
what I
job
don't think it's
being
right.
good job being courageous, pronouncing through it nonetheless. I also wanted to mention we're not going to cover it this week. Maybe we'll go over next week. But the new DevOps report Dora thing came out a couple of days ago. I think the 2024 one. Now we're going to need some time to read through the 120 pages of the PDF. Maybe we'll have some analysis. But I think listener Chris in the Slack channel actually did some live slacking PDF reading. He had some great excerpts, some commentary. I had a little discussion with him. But if you want to get like I think I wouldn't say executive. I don't know if he's an SVP of reading PDFs, but kind of an executive type of summary, kind of what's going on there. I think he's got some good criticism in the academic sense of the word and the non-academic sense of Dora stuff, which you can read if you go to softwaredefinedtalk.com/Slack. And I also wrote some stuff over in Blue Sky about it a little bit, mostly by being a bit of a shit and making a chart about the number of pages in the Puppet and Dora PDFs, which I don't know. I actually, do I mind? That's a good question.
Is shorter
No,
better? I guess that's what your diagram. That's the question your diagram raises. It's like, well, is a long survey better or is a short survey better?
that's we need to figure out the West Durham cohorts about the number of pages in PDFs and see if between the elite, the high, is it the mid, and the low performers.
Mhm.
Maybe one year the difference between the elite and the high will be so hard to tell. We'll just collapse it all into high. But I wonder if there's a correlation between corporate productivity and PDF length or not. Well, speaking of PDF length, there's several conferences coming up. I'm in. It's hard to not realize, accept this. Next week is Halloween, and as everyone knows, what happens after Halloween is VMware Explore Barcelona, November 4th to 7th. Well, where I will be with several other people. I think it'll be nice. I've of course, I get roped in, which is to say, it's my job to write some promotional blogs about it. And I've been thinking, I think this might be. Let me float this by you. This is get some editorial input here. Based on what we're doing in VMware Tanzu land, I think this might be the biggest private cloud conference that exists at the moment. I'm gonna maybe I'll compare this to some IBM conferences, but I
Oh,
think
I think you've got. I mean, hands down, right? Like, I don't think there's
yeah,
a close second. I mean, VMware's
which
definitely.
I think it's especially on this podcast, it's easy to snigger a little bit about that. But I don't know. I think there's some sort of messaging to go in there, some sort of framing, some
Well,
positioning.
you're the one. You should like. I don't know. You need to throw repatriation into like some kind of like a topic slash like um, I don't know, a title of a session or something.
Well, let me okay.
That
Let
would
me
be
give
like
it.
one of the top rated sessions of the entire show.
Let me give you a preview of a title I'm kicking around, you and the listeners. I'm trying to work a headline that's along the lines of "You can't repatriate if you never left," and that's kind of like an idea that I'm developing in my head
Oh,
there.
I love
Anyways,
this. I love it. No, I
so
like it. We need to. We're gonna after we get off, I'm gonna workshop this with you. I got like immediately 5 ideas to go into it.
So so VMware Explore Barcelona, November 4th to 7th. It's going to be great.
Mhm.
I've been helping several of our customers talk about what they've been doing, NatWest and Mercedes Benz. So you'll get to,
Oh,
I try to
nice.
only get involved in things where you have people telling you what they're actually doing. Otherwise, I don't know. You just got to trust that I know what I'm talking about, which even I don't really trust that. Also, I was asked to speak at Go Tech World in Bucharest, Romania. That's November 12th to 13th. And then thankfully, I won't be traveling all of November because on November 21st, there's SRE Day Amsterdam, which will be fun to speak at. There's a discount code if you go to softwaredefinedtalk.com/490, and you can find the discount code for it. And I'm trying to still figure out going to DevOps Days LA and Scale 22X, which I've been to. It'd be nice to go there for it'd be 3 years now. I think I've gone. That's going to be March 6th to 9th, of course, 2025, unless you have a time machine. Uh, you won't be able to go back in time. But that's a great conference. You should check that one out. If you're able, I would recommend going to it. Now, speaking of great conferences and things you can go back to, Brandon, what do you have to recommend this week?
Well, I'm going to re-up a couple of previous recommendations with some new information. So as I mentioned last week, I was traveling out of the country. So I got to, if you will, field test Tailscale. And here's what I've learned. And also many people chimed in on the Software Defined Talk Slack and gave me some information. So one, overall Tailscale, still fantastic. Love it. Now, if you're using YouTube TV, and my main goal was to be able to watch US sports through Tailscale from my home, and so I could see all the games when I was away in Mexico. Here's what I learned. It does work. But if you're using an iPad or an iPhone or really any device that has a GPS in it, YouTube TV is smart. It'll say, I want your precise location of your device before I let you watch anything, even if you're going through the VPN. So you can't really defeat it. I think
That's just not fair.
there's some ways to like spoof your location on iOS, but it was just too difficult. I didn't get into it. Now it does work very well if you're using an Apple TV or your MacBook, because as Cote, as you know, they don't have a GPS in it. So they're just reliant on the network. That's all they can do. So if you want to watch, if you will, regionally restricted programming through Tailscale, and the people that made the apps are smart and they're actually trying to tie you through the precise location, don't rely on your iPad or Apple TV. Use your MacBook or your Apple TV or anything that doesn't have a GPS in it, right? And Chris, who was on his way back, he was the one that was reading the Dora report. I guess he had a lot to do on his vacation. He was in Italy, and so he field tested the same approach with the Fire Stick. So if Amazon Fire Stick does not have any GPS in it, so you could watch YouTube TV. So it's important. And then the other thing that Chris learned the hard way, I already kind of, again, I knew this. Make sure you have multiple endpoints at your house just in case, one of your devices goes out. So Chris, he was using his Apple TV. I don't know, something happened. He couldn't reboot it. So I think he convinced his neighbor to come over and rebooted it, or maybe put it on like a Wi-Fi plug or something along those lines. So Tailscale, great. YouTube TV, they're a little too smart for themselves. So hopefully they won't figure out another way to find the precise location. So just remember, take a non-GPS device with you so you can watch, for me, you can watch college NFL football anywhere you are. So that's recommendation one. The other one quickly is the Oslo Sleep Buds. I've mentioned this a bunch of times, but if you were kind of waiting to see if the company was actually going to work out and do well, they finally released to the public. There's a nice review of them on The Verge. They have an official website. They're got funding, so you can go buy them directly from them, and you don't have to do that weird crowdsourcing thing. And again, I've actually come to really like the Sleep Buds. At first, I was like, I'm not sure they're going to be that great, but I like them. I use them every night. So if you are looking for someone that has a lot of extra cash, because they are expensive, they're still not cheap. But if you want to find a way to sleep, check them out.
Yeah, maybe a good, Christmas and the holidays are coming
Yeah,
up.
there you go.
Maybe it's a good Thanksgiving stocking stuffer. Figure that out. Well, well, one's not a recommendation, but the other is. So my nephew Caleb is he's finishing up his college career. He goes to A&M, and as a UT person, that's fine. I don't really have much to say about it, but he's been a great computer science situation they got over there at the A&M. But he needs to finish his college career, he needs an internship. And I think he's in particular interested in security, or as they say, cybersecurity. So if you have, or someone who's got an internship program, you should contact me, because he needs one, and he's fine. I remember when he was very small. Seems like a good responsible person now. And get yourself an intern. It'd be great. Now, my recommendation is I started reading a book. I think I bought this in Cologne, as we say in English, or like Köln, as the Germans say. It's this book called What Artists Wear by Charlie Porter. Now, I'm reading this book. Hold on for it, Brandon. I'm not listening to it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not reading it on a screen. I'm reading it in 3 dimensions.
Wow.
Good old paper. And it is
paperback or hardcover?
It's paperback.
Okay,
I've got
you're
the
on hardcover. There you go. Mm-hmm.
I've got the Penguin edition, so it's that drugstore format.
Yeah.
I don't know what they call it, but it's the title is incredibly accurate, because what it's about is he goes through the way it's organized is by type of clothing, and then he picks one major artist to discuss the type of clothes they wear that are like that, and then kind of minor ones. So you've got a whole section on like tailored formal, suits and tuxedos. You got another one on workwear. You have, this, that, and the other. It's all over the place, but it's a good like contemplation, a good Venn diagram, as we were saying earlier, of artists and clothes that they wear, and a contemplation of each. And I don't think it really I've only read about a fourth of it. I don't think it ever makes any like big conclusions about what it all means, but it more, this is like a fashion writer. It more uses artists wearing types of clothes to tell you about that type of clothing and what that type of clothing means. It's kind of like the artist is a tool to talk about the clothes, which now that I say that out loud, that's a great way to think about something. Is I'm using this other hallowed thing just to tell you about the thing that I like, which good move, Charlie Porter. So speaking of good moves, you've listened all the way to the end of yet another Software Defined Talk episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you want to see the show notes, things we've talked about, you can link to an overview of my nephew looking for an internship, the books, Tailscale, all sorts of stuff we didn't talk about, discount codes for the conferences. You can go to softwaredefinedtalk.com/490. Look that up. You should join our Slack community, things like that. Also, if you've listened this far and you don't already listen to the rebooted Software Defined interviews, you should go look that up, subscribe to it. We've got 2 episodes out now. We have, I think, 4 guests scheduled, which will be very interesting and fun. So we've got plenty. Well, we have to actually do it, as you know, Brandon. But we actually have things scheduled throughout the rest of the year, since we release every 2 weeks. So it should be good stuff. Between Whitney and me, I think we have an interviewing style which will not be encountered anywhere else. So it's good, unique content for you. So with that, I hope you've enjoyed this good, unique content, and we'll see everyone next time. Goodbye.
All right. Well done, Kote, as always. We should have, I don't know, I maybe should have mentioned Matt's pick. His pick was internet outages during software defined talk recordings. He was sad.
Exactly.
I tried to make it in, and then I was like, it's funny. We'll see if we put this up. I wasn't going to let him in because it messes up the editing, because he would have come in the middle. It would have been hard to sync the tracks. So I was in this awkward position where he sort of asked to come in. I was like, oh man, what am I going to do? And then he said, oh, the internet's not working. So it's like, sometimes when you're in an awkward position, Coach, you can just do nothing and it just resolves itself. And you're like, oh, it just like, I didn't have to do anything. The internet didn't work and it didn't mess up our recording. So
this notion of doing nothing is a core part that I remember encountering all the time in corporate strategy and M&A. Is if you wanted to be really clever, whenever you're talking about strategy, basically you can say like, yeah, but what if we do nothing? Like why is doing this move going to be better than just taking that money and doing what we're doing? Right. And
True.
that is a good, as they say, hurdle to get over. Is what do they call it? The IRR, right? Like if we just take this money and like, get free Wi-Fi in the planes, is that going to be better than doing some new thing? Like, let's just incrementally improve.
There is a fine line between, obsessing over the customer and doing nothing. Right. But I don't know, there's a lot to be said for I don't know, day-to-day life. Sometimes doing nothing. It is amazing how many things resolve themselves when you do nothing. That is a weird conundrum, right? So
yeah, maybe it's a little more commentary. I think despite all the there's the commentary about like people like to do activity and learn things. I think maybe that's the fundamental conflict between the individual and the capitalist system. Is the capitalist system wants to do something, and ultimately the individual wants to do nothing, right? And in both directions, how you resolve that conflict, it determines your margin. That's what the whole thing's about.
I think well said. Well, on that note, I want to thank Michael. Thanks for watching us stream today, and for everyone watching along. Oh, I should have said, I should have also plugged, I don't know, evidently Blue Sky is getting some more users. So if you watch this entire video and you're someone that's on Blue Sky, you should follow Software Defined Talk, because you know what? We're already there. We've been there for a while. So
yes,
I don't know if that's the new place. Well, we're already there, because I want us to be everywhere, and I think we're everywhere. So check it out. Follow us there.
Yeah, we were there. We were there when it was a new place the first time, and so
that's right. All right. With that.